think about that moment,
Hmm.
a rich square of dark chocolate melting, or maybe biting into a creamy milk chocolate bar. It's this sort of universal comfort, isn't it? A global pleasure. But have you ever really stopped to think about just how huge the business behind that pleasure is? Today, we're going to take a truly sweet journey into the global chocolate market. We've got some fascinating numbers here from a source titled Global Chocolate Market Forecast, Growth and Regional Trends. So our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack these numbers. We want to identify the key trends across different regions, different countries,
Yeah.
and kind of highlight what makes certain markets really stand out. We're going to find out where chocolate consumption is absolutely thriving and, what these patterns might mean for the future of this treat we all love.
Yeah, and what's truly striking right from the start is just the sheer scale of this market and its projected path forward. I mean, back in 2021, the global chocolate market pulled in a total sales revenue of, get this, nearly $120 billion.
Wow, $120 billion.
Exactly. And it's not like it's slowing down. The projection is for it to soar to over $187 billion by 2033. That represents a compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of about 3.81%. And this growth, it's not just a number on a page, is it? It really makes you think about, well, how global consumption habits and maybe preferences are shifting.
Okay, $187 billion, that's massive. Let's maybe zoom in a bit. How about North America? I imagine that's a pretty big piece of the pie.
Oh, absolutely. North America is serious chocolate territory.
Right. So what are we talking numbers-wise?
Okay, so in 2021, the region saw over $34 billion in revenue.
$54 billion, yeah.
And that's expected to climb to almost $53 billion by 2033. So a steady annual growth rate there of about 3.7%.
And the U.S. must be leading that charge, right?
Unsurprisingly, yes. The United States is the regional leader. It accounted for roughly $23.4 billion back in 2021. And that's projected to hit nearly $34.7 billion by 2033. The CAGR there is around 3.3%.
Okay, so 3.3% for the U.S., but the overall region is 3.7%.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's where it gets interesting. While the U.S. is clearly the largest market, its neighbors, Canada and Mexico, are actually showing, well, even more dynamic growth.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Take Canada, for instance. It's projected to grow from just over $7.5 billion to more than $12.3 billion by 2033. That's a pretty robust 4.24% CAGR.
Okay, higher than the U.S.?
And Mexico. Even more impressive. It's going from around $3.3 billion to an estimated $5.7 billion. That boasts a 4.545% CAGR.
Wow, 4.5%.
Right. So it really highlights that while the U.S. market is huge and, mature, there seems to be this accelerated adoption, this increasing demand in other parts of the continent.
That is fascinating. What do you think might be driving that? I mean, why the faster growth in Canada and Mexico compared to the U.S.? Is it just market maturity or?
Yeah. Well, it could be a mix of things, really. In Canada, you often see influences from both the U.S. and European markets, right? So that can lead to quite diverse demand. And for Mexico, well, as incomes tend to rise and the population grows, chocolate might become a more accessible sort of everyday indulgence, maybe moving beyond just traditional candies. It suggests, a burgeoning market segment with quite a bit of room still left for expansion.
Makes sense. Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic then. Europe. I always think of Europe when I think of chocolate. Switzerland, Belgium.
Definitely. And the numbers back that up. Europe really dominates the chocolate scene, certainly in terms of sheer volume.
What's the scale there?
Europe's chocolate market stood at roughly $46.5 billion in 2021.
46.5, okay, even bigger than North America.
Yep. And it's set to grow to almost $68 billion by 2033. That reflects a steady annual growth rate of just over 3.2%.
3.2%. Slightly lower than North America overall, but still huge volume. What about big players? UK, Germany, France.
Right. So if we look at them, their growth is solid, robust, but fairly consistent, generally sitting in the 2.5% to maybe 2.8% CAGR range.
Okay.
So for the UK, that's about $9.6 billion going to $13.3 billion. Germany, around $8 billion up to $11 billion. France, roughly $6.4 billion to $8.6 billion. Steady growth in big established markets.
Right.
But, while the sheer size of those markets is impressive, what's really noteworthy when you dig into the data is the varied pace of growth within Europe.
Ah, okay. So it's not all the same.
Not at all. We see some of these more mature markets growing steadily, like we said, but then you get some surprises. Spain, for example.
Tangerine.
Yeah, Spain's showing much more dynamic growth. It's over 4.5% annually, projected to nearly double its market size to over $7.1 billion by 2033.
Wow, 4.5%. That's up there with Mexico.
Exactly. And then there's this category called the rest of Europe segment that's booming even faster, almost a 6% CAGR.
6%. Who's in rest of Europe?
It's usually a mix, often including some Eastern European countries or smaller markets where maybe chocolate penetration wasn't as high traditionally. It's going from about $2.5 billion to over $5 billion.
Okay, so some parts are really taking off, but you said varied pace. Any slower ones?
Well, conversely, look at a country like Luxembourg. Very, very modest growth projected, less than 1% CAGR, 0.889% to be precise.
Less than 1%. That's quite a spread across Europe, isn't it? Nearly 6% in one segment, under 1% in another.
It really is.
What explains that? I mean, within a relatively, integrated market like Europe.
Well, it's likely a combination of things again. That rest of Europe segment, as I said, often includes emerging economies within the continent or regions where chocolate consumption is still gaining traction. Plus, rising disposable incomes play a role. Luxembourg, on the other hand, is a very affluent, probably quite saturated market already. Their slower growth might just indicate that, well, per capita consumption has largely plateaued. Or maybe preferences are just really well established, leaving less room for that kind of rapid expansion you see elsewhere.
Interesting. Okay, now you mentioned dynamic growth.
Mm-hmm.
Where does Asia-Pacific fit into this? I feel like that's where things often get really interesting in global markets.
You called it. The Asia-Pacific region is showing some incredibly dynamic growth for chocolate.
Absolutely.
Okay, lay it on us.
So APAC's sales revenue was around $21.6 billion in 2021.
21.6. Smaller than North America or Europe, but...
But wait for the projection. It's expected to jump to almost $38.6 billion by 2033. That reflects a really robust TJR of nearly 5%, 4.934% to be exact. Nearly 5%. That's significantly faster than Europe or North America.
It is, and China is a huge part of that story, as you'd expect. Its market is projected to almost double. Went from $7.3 billion in 2021, projected to go over $14.6 billion by 2033.
Wow. And the growth rate for China?
It's a very notable 5.83% CAGR.
Almost 6% for China alone. Incredible.
Indeed. And actually, if we zoom in even further within APAC, India leads the region with the highest CAGR, nearly 6%, 5.927%.
India is growing even faster than China.
In terms of the rate, yes. It's projected to grow from about $2.4 billion in 2021 to almost $4.8 billion by 2033, doubling its market size.
Amazing.
And you also have countries like South Korea showing strong growth, about 4.3% CAGR. And the wider Southeast Asia region is also contributing significantly, around 4.5% CAGR.
So this surge in Asia, it's not just population, is it?
No, not just population size. It really reflects powerful shifts like rising disposable incomes, increasing urbanization, changing consumption patterns right across Asia. Chocolate seems to be becoming more accessible, more culturally integrated. We're really witnessing quite a profound shift in consumer preferences there. It's not just a Western treat anymore.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've covered the big three: North America, Europe, Asia Pacific. What about other parts of the world? South America, Middle East, Africa.
Right. Let's touch on those because there's interesting growth there too, even if the overall market sizes are smaller.
Okay, South America.
South America shows a pretty healthy appetite for chocolate. Total revenue there is projected to grow from about $8.3 billion in 2021 to over $14 billion by 2033.
$14 billion. Not insignificant.
Not at all. And that's a robust 4.4% CAGR overall for the region. Brazil kind of leads the charge there with a growth rate close to 5%, 4.93% CAGR.
Okay, strong growth in South America, too.
Yeah.
Middle East.
The Middle East market is set to expand from roughly $6.2 billion in 2021 to over $10.2 billion by 2033.
$10 billion. Also solid.
Yeah, growing at a solid 4.3% annually. And Saudi Arabia really stands out there, particularly strong growth projected at over 5.2% annually.
Over 5% in Saudi Arabia. Okay, and finally, Africa.
Africa's chocolate market, well, it's smaller in absolute terms, started at about $2.5 billion in 2021. It's projected to grow to over $3.5 billion by 2033. So the growth rate is a bit more moderate, around 2.3% CAGR overall.
2.3%. Okay. Any standouts within Africa?
Well, within Africa, South Africa shows a stronger growth rate, about 2.6% compared to Nigeria, which is projected around 1.6%. So some variation there, too.
Got it. So taking a step back, looking at all these regions,
Yeah.
what's the big picture? What really stands out?
Well, what really emerges when you look at all these regions together is this diverse tapestry of growth rates. It's quite striking. You have the mature markets, right? Europe, North America. They show steady, significant increases, mainly because they have these huge existing consumer bases,
Yeah.
billions and billions in
Like
sales.
the volumes are massive.
Exactly. But the highest growth rates, the really dynamic percentage increases, are consistently found in these emerging economies. You see it in Asia Pacific, parts of the Middle East, South America.
So faster percentage growth, even if the starting point is lower.
Precisely. And this pattern, it kind of suggests that as economic development progresses around the world and as consumer tastes diversify, well, the humble chocolate bar is increasingly becoming maybe a staple of indulgence
Hmm.
or perhaps aspiration. It seems to reflect these much broader, profound economic and cultural shifts happening globally.
That's a great way to put it. So what does this all really mean for us listening? We've crunched a lot of numbers here. We've seen where chocolate is booming, where it's growing steadily, from a global market of, what was it, almost $120 billion in 2021
Yep, nearly 120.
to a projected $187 billion by 2033. It just seems clear the world's love affair with chocolate isn't slowing down anytime soon. Thanks for joining us on this, well, very sweet deep dive.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. And as we do look out towards 2033 and think about a global chocolate market getting close to $190 billion, it's really not just about indulgence, is it? I mean, that scale of growth, especially for what's technically a non-essential consumer good, it kind of invites us to consider the underlying economic and cultural shifts that are really at play. The rise of middle classes in different parts of the world, changing lifestyles, the global spread of tastes. It leaves you with a thought, doesn't it? How do these seemingly simple pleasures, like a piece of chocolate, actually reflect the complex, evolving dynamics of our interconnected world? Welcome to the deep dive. We take complex topics and try to boil them down to the key insights for you. Today, we're diving into something pretty universal, the global chocolate market. Ever wonder what's really shaping, our sweet cravings and the huge industry behind it all? We've been looking at some really insightful research from Cognitive Market Research. Their report, it's called The Shifting Global Chocolate Market Landscape. And our mission today is basically to unpack all that. The shifts, the big drivers, what's holding things back, and some surprising trends that are really changing the game. You'll probably find there's a lot more to a chocolate bar than just, well, a treat. It taps into global economics, changing tastes, and some pretty important ethical questions, too.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so interesting is that chocolate, it seems simple,
Yeah.
right? But the market itself is like a perfect little model for understanding these massive global changes. We're talking consumer behavior,
Yeah.
but also economic development across continents, environmental pressures hitting supply chains, even how tech is changing old industries. So this deep dive, it gives you a unique way to see how a product we often just, enjoy reflects these really complex world dynamics. Let's maybe start with what's actually driving the growth. What are those big forces pushing the market forward?
Okay, yeah. So, looking at the data, the first really big thing is just this huge jump in chocolate eating, especially in developing economies. Think places like India, China, Brazil.
Yes.
As cities grow, as the middle class expands there,
Yeah.
the demand for, well, both everyday chocolate and the fancy imported stuff is just
Well,
soaring.
it's almost like a whole new wave of consumers discovering it.
Right, discovering it in a big way.
And that's a critical point. It's not just about people having more money, though that's part of it. If you link it to cultural changes, like gifting culture during festivals, special occasions, chocolate becomes a go-to gift. That bumps up demand, especially for quality stuff.
Ah, good point. The gifting aspect.
And then there's the foundation underneath all that.
Yeah.
Better shops, modern retail infrastructure, and maybe most importantly, e-commerce. These platforms are making all kinds of chocolate, even those high-end foreign brands, so much easier to get everywhere, way more than before. That really fuels the expansion.
Yeah, accessibility is key. But it's not just where people are buying, it's also what they're buying, right? The industry itself is getting incredibly creative. There's this massive wave of innovation that's like transforming the chocolate bar itself.
Hmm.
People aren't just happy with plain old milk chocolate anymore. There's a real pull towards dark chocolate, plant-based versions, sugar-free, organic. It lines up with that whole global shift towards healthier, maybe more mindful living.
Absolutely. And brands are responding. They're getting really clever with unique flavors, adding functional ingredients, stuff for a supposed health boost.
Right, like added vitamins or protein.
Exactly. And even rethinking the formats. Bite-sized pieces are huge, convenient, or even sophisticated drinkable chocolates. It's
Yeah.
like they're completely reimagining a classic product.
And who's driving that demand for novelty?
Well, this really connects to a big generational thing. Millennials and Gen Z, they seem particularly drawn to these new formats and flavors. They're looking for more than just indulgence. They want an experience, something that fits with their values, maybe health, maybe ethical production, or just trying something new and adventurous.
So the market's really having to adapt to a more demanding consumer.
Definitely. They expect more from their treats now.
And you mentioned values. That ties into another thing we're seeing, this growing appetite for premium artisanal chocolate. Especially in places like Western Europe and North America, people there seem increasingly willing to pay more.
Yeah, pay a premium.
But it's not just for, say, better taste, it's for the whole package, the story behind it.
Right. They want to know about ethical sourcing. They look for high cocoa content. They want a brand narrative that talks about sustainability, craftsmanship.
It goes beyond just the chocolate itself. It's an experience that kind of reflects their own principles.
That move towards value-driven buying is really powerful.
Yeah.
But, it also leads us to the flip side. What are the challenges? Because with all this growth and innovation, the industry is also dealing with some major roadblocks, some significant restraints.
Okay, so what are the big ones?
Well, one of the toughest is probably the volatility of cocoa prices
Mm.
and just general supply chain disruptions. Sourcing cocoa is tricky. It's really vulnerable to climate shifts, droughts, too much rain, and also political instability in the big producing countries. Think Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana.
Right, where most of the world's cocoa comes from.
Exactly. And then you have broader global trade issues layered on top of that. It all creates ripples, making stable production a real constant juggle.
It sounds like a really complex web. And it's not just the cocoa bean itself, is it? Manufacturers are also getting squeezed by rising costs for other stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Sugar, milk, even energy prices.
Yeah.
All those input costs are going up.
That must really pinch profits, especially for the smaller guys, the artisanal producers who don't have those huge economies of scale.
For sure. It makes it much harder for them to compete. And then there's the whole health angle. That's huge now. People are just much more aware of sugar intake, calories.
Yeah.
It's genuinely changing how people buy things.
Yeah, you see that everywhere.
Traditional milk chocolate, white chocolate,
Yeah.
they're feeling the pressure. And you've got government stepping in too, with things like sugar taxes, clearer labels on the front of packs.
Right, the traffic light systems and things like that.
Exactly. It all pushes consumers towards what they see as healthier options. It's making the industry rethink what a treat even means, maybe forcing reformulation.
And there's one more really critical restraint, isn't there? The ethical side.
Yes, absolutely critical. Environmental ethical sourcing. The chocolate industry has this, difficult history. Links to deforestation and, tragically, child labor.
And consumers know more about this now.
They do. They're more informed, and they're actively looking for brands that can prove they meet ethical standards, that have transparent supply chains. Getting those certifications, showing that transparency, it's basically essential now for building trust. But of course, it adds complexity. It adds cost for the manufacturers.
So it's this constant balancing act between doing the right thing and managing the bottom line.
Precisely. But interestingly, those very challenges often spark the most exciting innovations, which leads us nicely into the emerging trends, doesn't it?
Okay, yeah. So how is the industry responding? What's new?
Well, one massive trend is the surge in plant-based and vegan chocolate.
Oh, yeah. You see that everywhere now.
It's exploded. Dairy-free options using almond milk, oat milk, rice milk, they're not niche anymore. They're totally mainstream. And that directly reflects people adopting veganism, sure, but maybe even more so, flexitarian diets, where people cut down on meat and dairy without going fully vegan.
That makes sense. It broadens the appeal massively.
And it's not just about swapping ingredients. Brands are getting serious about cruelty-free labels, specific plant-based certifications. That's a big deal for today's conscious consumer.
And speaking of consciousness, that links back to the transparency point, right? Sustainability and knowing where your food comes from.
Absolutely. That's become a major way for brands to stand out. Companies are using tech, like blockchain or QR codes on packaging.
So you can actually trace the beans.
Potentially, yes. Imagine scanning a code on your chocolate bar and tracing the cocoa back to the specific farm or cooperative. That kind of tech builds huge trust.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
It reinforces that ethical commitment. And it goes beyond the chocolate itself, too. Think about packaging.
Right, less plastic.
Exactly. Big push towards eco-friendly packaging, compostable materials, plastic-free wrappers,
Yeah.
driven by shoppers who are actively looking for those options. It forces manufacturers to think about the whole life cycle, bean to wrapper and beyond.
Okay, so ingredients, sourcing, packaging. What about how we actually buy chocolate? Is that changing too?
Massively. We're seeing a huge growth in direct-to-consumer sales DTC. Brands selling straight from their website.
Skipping the middleman.
Right. And alongside that, things like subscription boxes are booming, and just general e-commerce sales for chocolate are way up. These online channels allow for incredible personalization. Brands can build a much closer relationship, almost an intimacy with their customers.
And they can reach people anywhere, presumably?
Exactly. Global reach, which means smaller, niche, artisanal brands can find their audience directly. They can adapt really quickly to seasons, to new trends, respond almost in real time.
So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Growth drivers, challenges, new trends. What does it all mean, sort of, when you put it together?
Well, we've taken this journey through the dynamic world of chocolate, haven't we? We saw the powerful drivers, that booming consumption in developing countries, the constant innovation in what chocolate actually is, and that demand for premium ethical products.
Yeah, and then the tough stuff, the restraints. Volatile prices, fragile supply chains, rising costs, and those really important health and ethical questions hanging over the industry.
Right. But then, emerging from those challenges, we see these exciting trends. The plant-based explosion, the demand for real transparency, sustainable packaging, and this whole shift towards digital and direct selling.
When you lay it all out, it's clear that chocolate isn't just, a simple treat. It's actually this fascinating case study.
Exactly. It shows perfectly how these complex global supply chains, changing consumer values, new technologies, and ethical pressures all weave together to completely reshape an entire industry.
So understanding what's happening in chocolate, it actually gives you a lens to understand similar forces at play in lots of other sectors, too.
I think so, yes.
Mm.
It's a really good microcosm of modern commerce in many ways. It shows how even our simplest wants, like a piece of chocolate, are now tied into this huge global network of growers, innovators, and increasingly conscious consumers.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you listening. The next time you find yourself reaching for a chocolate bar, maybe just pause for a second. Think about your own choice. What are you looking for? Because that decision you make, multiplied by millions, maybe billions of people around the world, well, it really can influence where the market goes next. It can push for more ethical practices. It can genuinely shape the future of these huge global industries.
Your choice matters.
You might be a much bigger part of the next big shift than you realize. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Hopefully you feel a little bit sweeter and maybe a lot smarter about the world of chocolate now.